Imagine a world where a single man holds the power of life and death over millions. A world where a nod, a whisper, or a simple bad mood can sentence a senator, a general, or a family member to a brutal execution. Now, imagine that this man is not just a tyrant, but a lunatic. A man who believes he is a living god, who declares war on the ocean, and who plans to make his favorite horse a politician. We are walking the marble streets of ancient Rome in the year 37 AD. The air is thick with tension, paranoia, and the scent of blood. This is the story of Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, but history remembers him by a different name, a childish nickname that came to symbolize absolute terror. Caligula. To understand the monster, we first have to understand the child, because before the madness, before the cruelty, Caligula was actually the hope of the empire. He was born into the most beloved family in Rome. His father was Germanicus, a brilliant general, a war hero, the man everyone wanted to be emperor. As a toddler, little Gaius would travel with his father to the military camps near the Rhine River. His mother would dress him up in a miniature soldier's uniform, complete with tiny boots. The soldiers, toughened by war and cold, adored him. They laughed and pointed at his little feet, calling him Caligula, which literally means little boot. It was cute, it was innocent, but the innocence didn't last long. His childhood was shattered by tragedy. His father died under mysterious circumstances, poisoned, many whispered, by the jealous Emperor Tiberius. Caligula watched as his mother and brothers were exiled, starved, and murdered by the state. He was a teenager living in the belly of the beast, trapped on the island of Capri with the very man who killed his family, the old, paranoid Emperor Tiberius. Imagine being a teenager, living every single day knowing that one wrong word, one slip of the mask, would mean your death. Caligula learned to hide his feelings. He learned to smile at his enemies. He learned that empathy was a weakness and that power was the only shield. As historians later wrote, he was the ultimate actor. He was the best of slaves and the worst of masters. When Tiberius finally died in 37 AD, Rome exploded with joy. The dark days were over. The son of the beloved Germanicus was finally here. Caligula rode into Rome amidst cheering crowds. They called him their star, their chick, their baby. In the first few months, he was perfect. He lowered taxes. He recalled exiles. He put on magnificent gladiator games. It felt like a golden age had begun. But then, just 6 months into his reign, something happened. Caligula fell violently ill. For weeks, he hovered between life and death. The people of Rome slept outside the palace, praying for his recovery. They offered their own lives to the gods in exchange for his. He survived. But the man who woke up from that fever was not the man who lay down. Something had snapped in his mind. Whether it was the high fever frying his brain, or the absolute power finally unleashing his true nature, Caligula changed. The little boot was gone. The monster had arrived. The first sign was the Purges. He forced his father-in-law to slit his own throat. He executed his cousin, a young boy who was a rival to the throne. But this wasn't just political elimination. It was the way he did it. He began to enjoy the suffering. He famously said, "I have the power to do anything to anybody." And he meant it. Let's step into the Senate House for a moment. Imagine you are a Roman senator. You are powerful, wealthy, dignified. But when Caligula walks in, you tremble. You don't look him in the eye. Why? Because he might decide, on a whim, to torture you. He began to see himself not as a man, but as a living deity. He ordered the heads cut off the statues of gods like Jupiter and Apollo, and had his own head carved onto them. He would walk through the palace dressed as Venus, or Hercules dressed in lion skins, demanding to be worshipped. He built a bridge connecting the Palatine Hill to the Temple of Jupiter just so he could walk across and converse with the god as an equal. But his madness wasn't just religious. It was deeply personal and deeply perverse. He had 3 sisters, but his relationship with them was far from normal. The rumors of incest ran wild in Rome. His favorite was Drusilla. When she died suddenly, Caligula's grief was as violent as his rage. He declared her a goddess. He made it a capital crime to laugh, to bathe, or to eat dinner with your family during the mourning period. If you didn't look sad enough, you died. If you looked too sad implying you questioned his divinity, you died. The atmosphere in Rome shifted from joy to a suffocating nightmare. Nobody was safe. Wealthy citizens were forced to leave their entire fortunes to the emperor in their wills. And then Caligula would force them to commit suicide so he could collect the money faster. At dinner parties, he would burst into sudden, hysterical laughter. When asked why, he would reply, "I was just thinking that with a single snap of my fingers, I could have all your throats cut." Imagine trying to eat your meal after hearing that. His spending was legendary. In less than a year, he burned through the massive treasury Tiberius had saved over decades. He built useless, extravagant structures. He constructed two massive floating palaces on Lake Nemi, complete with marble floors, plumbing, and gardens, just for orgies and parties. And then there was the bridge at Baiae. An astrologer had once told him that Caligula had no more chance of becoming emperor than of riding a horse across the Bay of Baiae. So what did he do? He lined up hundreds of merchant ships, anchored them together, covered them with dirt, and rode his horse across the ocean for 2 days straight, wearing the breastplate of Alexander the Great. It was a massive waste of resources that caused a famine, because the grain ships were used for his bridge instead of importing food. But he didn't care. He had proven the prophecy wrong. Speaking of horses, we have to talk about Incitatus. This was Caligula's favorite racehorse. But Incitatus lived better than most humans. The horse had a stable made of marble, a manger made of ivory, and purple blankets. Caligula would invite dignitaries to dine with the horse, and in the ultimate insult to the Roman political system, he announced plans to make the horse a consul, the highest elected official in Rome. Some historians say this was a joke, a way to mock the Senate, to show them that a horse could do their job better than they could. But to the people living through it, it was just another sign that their leader had lost his grip on reality. The cruelty escalated. At the gladiator games, if there were no criminals left to fight the wild beasts, he would simply order his guards to throw entire sections of the crowd into the arena, to be eaten by lions. He had their tongues cut out first so they couldn't scream or curse him. He was a man constantly bored, constantly seeking the next thrill. He wished for disasters. He complained that his reign was too peaceful, that there were no great plagues or fires to make him memorable. He famously said, "I wish the Roman people had but a single neck," implying that he could decapitate the entire population with one swing of a sword. His military campaigns were equally insane. He marched the Grand Roman legions all the way to the northern coast of Gaul, looking toward Britain. The soldiers prepared for a massive invasion. They stood on the beach, swords drawn, waiting for the order to charge. And then Caligula gave the order, "Gather seashells." You heard that right. He ordered the most powerful army in the world to pick up seashells on the beach and fill their helmets. He called them plunder from the ocean and claimed a victory over Neptune, the god of the sea. He built a lighthouse to commemorate this victory and marched back to Rome in a triumph. The soldiers must have looked at each other in total bewilderment, wondering if their leader was a genius or a madman. They knew the answer, but terror cannot last forever. The higher the pressure, the closer the explosion. By the year 41 AD, 4 years into his reign, Caligula had alienated everyone. The Senate hated him. The people feared him. But most dangerously, he had humiliated the Praetorian Guard, his own bodyguards. He had a habit of mocking Cassius Chaerea, a senior officer in the Guard. Chaerea was a tough, veteran soldier, but he had a high-pitched voice. Caligula would taunt him relentlessly, calling him feminine names, using lewd passwords for the daily watch, and making him the laughing stock of the palace. It was a fatal mistake. You do not bully the man who holds the sword at your back. The conspiracy formed quickly. It wasn't a grand political revolution. It was a personal vendetta. On January 24th, 41 AD, Caligula was at the Palatine Games. He was feeling unwell, his stomach upset from a night of excess. Around noon, his advisors suggested he take a bath and eat something. He agreed and decided to take a shortcut through a narrow underground tunnel beneath the palace. This was the moment. The tunnel was dark and quiet. Caligula was separated from his German bodyguards. Cassius Sharia and the other conspirators were waiting in the shadows. As Caligula stopped to speak to some young actors, Sharia stepped forward. The first blow struck Caligula on the shoulder. It wasn't fatal, but it stunned him. The Emperor of Rome, the living God, looked at his attacker in shock. He didn't scream for help. He didn't beg. According to some accounts, he simply gasped, "I am still alive." But not for long. The other conspirators rushed in. Swords flashed in the dim torchlight. They stabbed him over 30 times. The little boot fell to the cold stone floor, his blood pooling in the dark tunnel, dying alone, butchered by the very men sworn to protect him. He was 28 years old. The chaos that followed was immediate. His German guards arrived too late and went into a frenzy, killing the assassins and innocent bystanders alike. But the deed was done. The tyrant was dead. The Senate tried to use this opportunity to restore the Republic, to erase the memory of the Caesars. They wanted to destroy his statues, melt down his coins, and pretend he never existed. This is a practice known as damnatio memoria, condemnation of memory. But you cannot simply erase a scar this deep. Caligula's body was hastily cremated and buried in a shallow grave to prevent his ghost from haunting the living. His wife and his infant daughter were murdered brutally the same day, ending his direct bloodline. So what is the legacy of Caligula? For centuries, he has stood as the ultimate warning. He is the embodiment of absolute power corruption. He shows us what happens when a leader loses their tether to humanity. When the whims of one man become the law of millions, was he truly clinically insane? Or was he just a spoiled young man with unlimited power, testing the boundaries of what he could get away with? Was the story of the horse and the seashells just dark humor that history took too seriously? We may never know the exact truth of his mind, but we know the truth of his reign. It was a 4-year nightmare that proved that civilization is fragile. It proved that the line between a golden age and a reign of terror is thinner than we think. As you listen to this, remember the people of Rome, the shopkeepers, the soldiers, the senators. They were people just like us, living their lives, hoping for stability. And they learned, in the hardest way possible, that when a man thinks he is a god, everyone else becomes a sacrifice. Caligula is dead. His palaces are ruins. His statues are broken. But the shadow he cast, the shadow of the little boot, still stretches across history, cold and terrifying, reminding us of the darkness that lies in the heart of absolute power.